Marcellas Reynolds. Hey there, and welcome to Upfront. How are you?
I'm very well today. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. I'm doing just fine. I'm smiling. I'm beaming from ear to ear because I'm so excited to be talking to you about your new book, Supreme Models. I saw the images of the book and I was like, how did this get past me? I try to stay on top of everything. That's right, that beautiful cover. And I said, I got to talk to this guy because this is really a one-of-a-kind, sort of the first of its kind project that really chronicles the history of African-American models, the supermodels, the women that we've all, just admired on runways and in the magazines, on covers. And that's right. And you've compiled all of this information in this amazing book. What was the inspiration for doing this?
So let's talk about that. So a couple of things. It's the first ever art book devoted exclusively to Black top models. It's the first book of its scale and its quality. That said, there are a couple of books out there that have, in different ways, tackled this topic. There's a wonderful woman from the 70s who was a model for Ford. Her name is Barbara Summers, and she wrote a couple of books about Black models. But hers aren't art books; they're paperback. They're more like novels, and hers are more like I always say that her book is like my book is like the Cliff Notes version or the picture book version of her books, because she really goes in depth about the history of models from as far back as the 1940s till now. My book does do that. And it was something that I set out to do. I felt like as I was compiling these images and beginning to tell an abbreviated story about these models, I was like, well, you can't tell that story completely unless you go back to the beginning and you talk about the Trailblazers. So my book there's a section called the Trailblazers, and it starts in the 1940s with the beginning of Ebony magazine, Johnson Publications. And that was what really started the need for Black models in the world, and especially in America.
Wow. And it's a beautiful book. And I love that you really delve into their stories. I mean, you really get some behind the scenes information. I know who Beth Ann Hardison is, but I didn't know that she was a muse for Willie Smith. I knew about Karen Alexander, but didn't really know her history. Same thing with Rashumba. Had no idea that she just decided she was going to go to Paris, and after her flight was left with $150. I mean, who does that?
Like, no money, but that's believing in yourself. To me, that's one of the best stories in the book. She had a dream, and she worked at a call center for an insurance company before she decided she wanted to model. And she got on a plane, got a book like where model agencies are in Paris. Got on a plane, packed some saltine crackers, some sardines, and some peanut butter in her suitcase. Got on the
Kool-Aid and the Kool-Aid.
Let's not forget a couple of packets of Kool-Aid, and went on and did her thing.
Wow. So how did you compile? Because these are some very intimate and intense stories. How did that process, or explain that process, if you will?
I reached out to my friend Tamiko Frazier Hines, who was the first Black model with the Maybelline contract. And I called Tamiko and I was like, girl, I'm writing a book. And she was like, oh, yay, about what? And I was like, about models. And she was like, great, am I in it? And I was like, of course, queen. And she was like, okay. And I was like, I'd like to interview you. And she was like, okay, let's set up a date and time, because she's got two twins. She's got two kids, they're twins, two boys. And I talked to Tamiko for like an hour and a half. And when I was done, I was exhausted. I was exhausted and I was exhilarated. And at one point we were both crying. And that was the moment I knew I had a book. And that was a moment when I knew that the stories could be compelling. You know, it takes a truth teller. It takes somebody that really isn't afraid. And Tamiko was unafraid. And she told me the good, bad, and ugly of her career. Now, the ugly doesn't make it into the book, really, because the book is not really about, it's an art book, so it's about the photographs. So I try to touch on a little bit of the history, and I try to touch on what the impact of these models were in the interviews, but I couldn't do the whole 2-hour interview. You know what I mean? But I think that that's there. You know, even in Tamiko's interview, she talks about ageism. She talks about racism. She talks about colorism. She talks about the body size debate in her interview. And I think that those are topics that we are still talking about in fashion.
Let's talk about that, the importance of this book right now, and the fact that, again, we're having these conversations. How do you think this book will help bring some more positive dialogue to the conversation?
Well, you know, it's funny because you decide you want to write a book, and this is my first book. Won't be my last, but it's my first. You decide you want to write a book. And at first I wanted to write a book that wasn't political. It was just a beautiful book about beautiful women. And the thing is, however, that Black skin is always politicized. So the fact that it's about Black women makes it political. The fact that it's about Black women, it's like, you know, it's like when you say Black Lives Matter. Well, why didn't you write a book about every model? You know, I'm writing a book about Black models because so often their journey in fashion is much harder than their white counterparts, than their Latin counterparts, than their Asian counterparts. You know, people want to sit around and they want to go, oh, well, Black girls work more than Asian girls and Latin girls. No, they don't. No, that's an absolute lie. Black girls are always a trend in fashion, as though my skin color and your skin color and their skin color somehow is a trend. My skin, my being is not a trend. You have to see me for everything that I am. You know, I am a person. So there will always be a space for a Latin girl who can pass for white to work in the space of, you don't know she's Latin. There'll always be a space for an Asian girl who has fair skin and that can blend right in with the Eastern European girls to work. But so often what we see on the runways is that there's not even a Black girl in a show. And then if there's like 20, 30, 40, 50 girls in a show, there will be 2. When what? Black people make up like what? 15, 18% of the population? You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that you have to put, you have to put as many Black girls in the show as matches the population. But I am saying that Black people spend a disproportionately high amount of money on clothing, makeup, jewelry, fashion, hair. And so you're trying to get Black dollars, you need to represent Black dollars. So yes, the book is about acknowledging the beauty and the successes of the Black model. And I hope that you walk away with that, but I hope you also walk away with the fact that it's incredibly hard for a Black model to break through. You know? I always talk about this topic of onlyness in life. Like as a Black person, you think there's only room for one. And it's not that we think that, it's that we're actually told that over and over again. You know, when I was a model, there would be like I would work for the Gap, or I would work for Target, or I would work for Kohl's, and I'd be on these big sets, and there would be 30 models. And there would be one Black boy to represent the entire race. And there would be maybe 1, maybe 2 Black girls. There would be a girl that was no darker than me. And then there would be a light-skinned Black girl that had big curly hair and had light eyes, who could maybe sometimes pass. And so you walk in and you think there's only, and then in companies, whether you're the only Black person, or you go to a meeting and you're the only Black person. And we're bred to think, we're sort of groomed to think that when another Black person comes into our space, that they're going to take something from us. You know, think about it like this. It was never Naomi versus Christy, Naomi versus Linda, who were the girls literally in Naomi's lane. She's one of the top 3 models ever, period, full stop. Her only competition was Linda Evangelista and Christy Turlington, as far as fashion and editorial and the runway. Now you can expand that to Cindy Crawford and Claudia Schiffer and maybe Kate Moss, if you're talking about the girls that were truly supers.
Right.
But Cindy Crawford was a commercial model that had editorial moments. So she's Pepsi, and she's Sports Illustrated, and she's Playboy. That ain't Naomi. But when Tyra comes along, all of a sudden the conversation is, oh, Naomi, Tyra's gonna take your spot. Again, onlyness. There's only room for one. Why isn't it that Naomi is competing with Linda or Christy? Or why is it there's always room for Linda, Christy, Claudia, all the women I just, mentioned, but there's only a spot for one model, one black face. And you can apply that to every single category of employment in life.
TV, film, theater, exactly.
Yeah.
What was it like working with Veronica Webb? Because she's actually, she gives some, she gives the foreword to the book. So what was it like working with her? Because to me, she was, and I think what I enjoy too about the book is that it really shows that these were very smart women. A lot of them were in college. A lot of them have degrees. And I think we have this idea that these models are just these beautiful women with no brains, no minds. But these are very brilliant individuals. And so I loved Veronica Webb's forward. Talk a little bit about that if you can.
I met Veronica, first of all, I worship at her throne, and I think she's amazing. She's one of my favorite models ever, and she is truly a supermodel. She's on that list of girls that were top models. I worked with Veronica. I was doing the Meredith Vieira show. I was on the show all the time. I always say I was Meredith's gay. So Meredith would have me on doing interviews, and she would have me on doing the panels, and she would have me on doing makeovers. And one day, Veronica Webb is on a panel that I'm on, and literally I'm vibrating because I love her so much. So I go running up to her, and I'm like, "Oh my God, you don't even understand. I love you." And Unzipped, I'm like quoting her lines from Unzipped when when she can't get the boot off, and I talk to her about how she was in Catwalk with her and Christy have this awkward moment in Catwalk, Christy's documentary. And I just go on and on about her relationship with Isaac and Azadine, and because she's this muse. And then I tell her I'm writing a book. And she's like, first of all, she was like, I know who you are, because I'm trying to explain who I am. And that blew my mind. And then I tell her about the book, and then she was like, what do you need from me? And I was like, well, I would love to interview you. And she was like, okay. And then I was like, well, you're a writer, because she wrote for The Source, and she wrote for Vibe, and she wrote for all these legendary magazines. She actually has a book of her own called Veronica Website, which is a compilation of all she wrote for Interview. She was the editor at large at Interview, a compilation book of her essays. And so I was like, well, I would love it if you would write an essay for the book. And she was like, I can do that. How many words do you need? And literally from that day, she's been nothing but an angel, a goddess, and right there with me, making introductions to models, making suggestions, introducing me to people in publishing and in fashion. And I always say that she's an angel and God gave her to me, because she's just as wonderful as you would think she would be.
Wow. Again, Marcellas, thank you so much for talking about your book, Supreme Models, and we'll be able to get more information about that as well at WCLK.com. Thank you so very much.